On Wednesday, the House of Representatives passed two split resolutions in order to end the possibility of a rail workers' strike. The first resolution, of course, would be for workers to accept a tentative agreement the Biden administration had negotiated back in September. That deal included an increase in pay, an additional personal day. However, the major unions, the rail unions, had rejected it because of the fact that it did not grant any paid sick leave. That was, of course, the major sticking point. Currently, rail workers have no paid time off. In fact, they have to use their vacation time instead when they get sick. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that has to be requested and approved ahead of time, and oftentimes it's not approved. So think about that for a second. Can you really plan when you're going to get sick? No, that's ridiculous. You can't sit there and plan. Oh, okay. So here's the thing. December 5th, I think I'm going to come down with the flu. I would like to request that day and the following day off. Okay, because I'm probably going to be vomiting. No, that's not what happens. That's not realistic. It's not how human beings work. Now, of course, companies don't actually care. I was, thinking, oh, well, I don't understand. How do you not realize this? But then you think, actually, they do know this, and they don't give a damn. They don't care. These are private corporations. They are all about making profit. It's about the money. It's the big profit margin. So now, that said, the president and Congress are involved in what should be private negotiations. Now, of course, the private negotiations had fallen through, and because it is freight rail, which is important to infrastructure, getting goods in and out, the supply chain, etc., and because of certain laws that were passed, Congress does have the ability to step in and spur negotiations, right? And of course, unfortunately, the negotiations are tilted in favor of the rail companies. So now, Biden and members of Congress, including progressives, unfortunately, seem to have sold out those rail workers in favor of helping these big corporations. So now, look, let me just state here that obviously nobody wants a rail strike. That would be disastrous for the economy, and that's absolutely true. If somebody out there is saying that, then yeah, that would be a disaster for the economy. That would be a disaster for the supply chain, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want a rail strike, but I want a fair contract that includes paid sick leave because people get sick. And if they do not get paid sick leave, then I believe they should absolutely strike. 100%. I don't care if they consider it an illegal strike. Are you going to bring the military? You're going to arrest? You're going to force people to go to work for a contract that they rejected? No, that's ridiculous. You should absolutely strike. Absolutely strike. That said, asking for 7 days, a year, by the way, of sick leave, paid sick leave, that's not asking for much. That's all they want. Now, Congress, unfortunately, as I said before, it does not represent workers, and it passed both resolutions. Now, you might think, hold on, there's the one resolution, okay, that was the tentative agreement that was rejected, but then they also have a second resolution that adds the 7 days of sick leave. Jeff, what's the problem? What's the problem, dude? I don't understand. Well, the thing is, this concurrent resolution is split off from that main bill, which means they are two separate pieces of legislation. They are not linked. One can pass, the other will not pass. And again, both of them passed the House, but now it goes to the Senate, which is, again, you have the Democrats and, you have a split Senate. And you need 60 votes in order to get any legislation passed through a Republican-led filibuster. So here's a likely scenario. The Senate will pass the rejected contract, forcing them back to work without paid sick leave, and will filibuster the paid leave plan, the 7 days of paid leave. That bill will get to Biden's desk, the one that passed. He'll sign it, and the rail workers will not get paid leave. That's it. I mean, we all see this coming. That's what happens when you decouple these bills. It is a guarantee. And by the way, only 3 House Republicans supported the sick leave measure, whereas you had 79 Republicans that voted to impose Biden's tentative agreement. So if that gives you any indication how Republicans in the Senate will vote, you are not going to get 10 Republicans to be in favor of adding 7 days of sick leave. It's just not going to happen. It's ridiculous. That said, we know that Republicans are full of shit, but you have Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley out there saying, Ted Cruz tweeting, well, I think paid sick leave is reasonable. Well, they can say all they want. It is the votes that matter. Everything else is PR. Everything else is a message. And we can see that they're going for the messaging of, we're the working class. When in reality, of course, Republicans are never with the working class. They hate the working class. That said, the Democrats also voted against the unions, even members of the squad. In fact, Jamal Bowman, Ilhan Omar, and even Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez voted in favor of both measures. These Democrats did not, because they were decoupled. And this is Representative Norma Torres from California, Representative Rashida Tlaib of Michigan, Mary Peltola of Alaska, Mark Pocan of Wisconsin, Donald Norcross of New Jersey, Jared Golden of Maine, Mark DeSaulnier of California, and Representative Judy Chu of California's 27th. So the rest of the Democrats, even members of the squad, voted with Nancy Pelosi in order to crush the unions and force them to accept a contract that is not favorable to them, that is favorable to the rail companies who don't, who can afford to do this, who can afford to give them 7 days of sick leave. Again, you might be wondering why it's such a big point, why there's a sticking point. I mean, again, there was some of the stuff in the contract that's good, or getting raises, right? No, the real issue was grueling schedules and staffing shortages. Over this past 6 years, America's freight carriers have actually shed about 30% of their employees. To compensate for the lost staffing, remaining workers now have to tolerate irregular schedules and little time off since railroads do not have much spare capacity left. And they refuse to hire more workers because their entire business model, the fact that they ended up actually making a ton of doubling their profit margins, is because they got rid of so many people. Their business model is based off running off as long of trains as they can with very, very little staff. So now that makes tons and tons of money. In fact, last year, the 7 dominant North American railways had a combined net income of $27 billion, nearly twice their margin a decade ago, before they implemented their new, of course, strategy of making sure they only have skeleton crews. In the interim, railways have collectively doled out about $146 billion in dividends and stock buybacks, while investing only about $116 billion back into their businesses. So I tell you that because it's very, very obvious that they could easily hire more staff. They could give paid leave to their workers and still be incredibly profitable, just not as profitable as they were before. Yet Biden and members of Congress, unfortunately, have basically ensured that these companies can continue to make money hand over fist while running their workers ragged, even to the point of where some of them literally die on the job because they can't get time off. Here's an example. Last June, one middle-aged union engineer postponed a doctor's visit for work because couldn't get the time off, and then died of a heart attack weeks later, right on the job. A conductor who spoke with the New York Times also began feeling run down last year, but declined to see a doctor for fear of being disciplined for taking an unplanned day off. Instead, waiting months for the next doctor's appointment to line up with this next scheduled day off. He then learned he had been suffering from an infection that could have been treated easily with medication weeks earlier, but would now require surgery. And of course, you're going to get the time off for that. This is why you can't treat human beings like machines, because obviously we're not. Unfortunately, that's what these companies are doing. They're treating their employees exactly like the rail cars. Human beings are not rail cars. They're not machines. They get sick, they require paid leave. But unfortunately, Democrats and progressives have sold out the unions that they said they claimed they were supposed to protect. Joe Biden said he is going to be the most pro-union president. This is not a pro-union action. This is anti-union, and this is terrible.